Let's pay a visit to Mark's True Crime Corner.
This is not a good neighborhood. I'm scared.
Now, here's your host, Mark Thompson.
True crime has gripped this country like a herpes virus. I mean, it is really, you can't get rid of it.
Oh, thanks for that introduction. Wow. Wow.
Well, I mean, just saying, what I'm trying to say is that
I've left a good impression with you.
I don't get it myself. I really don't. But I appreciate that many appreciate it. You know?
Yes.
So I appreciate the appreciation.
Well, to that point, the two cases that I'm going to cover are both in the top 10 movies for Max and Netflix for the past 2 or 3 weeks.
Wow.
So, yeah, the longevity of that popularity is pretty remarkable.
I like that you, and this is something that Courtney does really quite, I think she overthinks it. But she works so hard to find cases that have relevance in today's zeitgeist, in today's sort of cultural milieu, which would be it. And so with that said, tell us about what you have today.
Yes. So I'm going to cover 2 cases briefly because the first case I was going to cover, and the only case was The Truth About Jim, because it takes place in Santa Rosa.
Oh, cool.
And so particularly relevant for a large part of your listeners.
Yeah, North Bay.
But
what is this lover-stalker killer that I'm saying?
Lover-stalker killer. This film came out, it's a documentary. It came out on February 9th. It's still in the top 10 on Netflix. And this is a story about a man named Dave Krupa, who, this is Dave. This is a screen grab from the documentary. So this is what he looks like now. But if you go to the next visual, if you're following along visually. So Dave Krupa was a mechanic, and he met his wife, Amy Flora, while working at a garage. They married and had kids, but they were very young. They were in their mid to late 20s. And so by the time he was 35, Dave Krupa had divorced. And Amy Flora, his wife, took the kids and moved home to Iowa, and he followed them. And so he's single for the first time in his, sort of somewhat matured adult life. And so he is exploring dating, and he goes on some dating apps, very particularly Plenty of Fish.
I see.
And so he's on Plenty of Fish, and he really is just looking to kind of like casually date women. He's not into anything serious.
No.
He meets a woman, if you go to the next visual, and her name is Liz. And Liz Gollier is a single woman. She is an entrepreneur. She owns her own business. Mm-hmm. Liz is cleaning, and she really loves selfies. And she takes like hundreds of selfies a week. And so these are a couple of Liz's selfies. But Liz is really, really fond of Dave. They date for a little while. And this is a picture of the couple in better times. And so they're dating, and then one day a beautiful woman walks into the garage that Dave works at, and he's taken with her, and her name is Carrie Farver.
Oh.
And Carrie, at the time, he describes her as being blonde, but if you go to the next visual.
So because Krupa and Liz we're seeing there. Okay, this is Carrie.
Yeah, this is Carrie, yeah. So he's dating Liz Gollier, but who we just saw. But he meets Carrie.
Carrie, who's there on the left. Now that's her husband.
That's her son, Max.
Her son. Okay,
yeah.
All right.
So he meets Carrie. She comes into the garage. She has an issue with her Ford Explorer, and so he's working on that for her. And he asks her out. They go to Applebee's. Where all great love stories originate.
You know what? Good for him.
They have a great time. I've heard 2 different versions of this story.
Thompson, party of 4.
Yes, we're going to go to Applebee's. We're working toward Applebee's, actually.
Exactly, yeah, because everywhere we go leaves such a remarkable impression on Mark. And so he is dating Carrie, and he has Carrie at his house, and there's an incident where Liz, the selfie woman, encounters Carrie leaving his house as Liz is coming to Dave's house unannounced to pick up some of her stuff. And so Liz and Carrie give each other the side eye, and then they leave.
Now, Carrie at that point was still seeing him, right?
Yeah,
She was,
both.
when you say picking up some of her stuff, she was just coming by the house to get something. Okay.
Yeah. So all casual, the three of them all casual, but they didn't really know about each other until this moment where they pass one another.
Okay.
And so Carrie continues to see him. She's actually staying with him quite a bit because she works really close by. So she's there pretty frequently during the week. And
That's Carrie again on the left that we're seeing. Okay. Good.
She leaves for work one day and Dave goes to work. And then like a couple hours later, Dave gets like 50 text messages from Carrie. I want to move in with you. We need to move in. And he writes back and says, this is casual. I'm not ready for that. And then she proceeds to write like all these text messages with profanity and telling him he's ruined her life and really spiraling in the span of just like a couple hours. And so he's very confused by this behavior. And so then Carrie writes and says, I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Kansas. You're never gonna hear from me again. And a couple days goes by and he doesn't hear from Carrie. And then he doesn't stop hearing from Carrie. There was actually, I think in the span of 3 years, like 150,000 messages.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite crazy. She was texting, she was emailing.
This woman on the left,
This woman, Carrie. If you go to the next slide, I want to walk through some of the visuals. Yep. So here are some of the examples. So Carrie is reaching out to Dave. She's saying, I hate you. You ruined my life. Carrie's reaching out to Liz Golyar, the selfie woman.
Oh, yeah.
Saying, stop dating
the
Dave.
other girlfriend. Yeah.
Yeah. You're horrible. I hate you.
Saying stop dating him.
Yeah. Stop dating Dave.
Right.
Carrie's talking to her mom and her son, Max, but she won't get on a phone call. And she's telling him that she's not coming home and she's moved away. She misses her dad's funeral. And that's a really big red flag for Carrie's mom because Carrie's dad had been sick and died and she had not come home for that.
So all of a sudden it looks like something weird's going on.
Yeah. And then it escalates. So then Carrie burns down Liz Golyar's house.
Wow.
Yes.
This is of someone who had exhibited none of that behavior prior to this.
Yep. And I'm going to tell you this, even though I don't want to, but I think it's important to the story. Liz had 2 kids. They were not in the home, but all of Liz's pets were in the home and they all died.
Oh, that's
They
so
all
sad.
perished in the fire.
Oh.
And
now I care.
And so, and then Amy Flora, who I talked about earlier, she's getting threats. Dave's kids are getting threats. And then one day, Liz is shot in a park. There's a gunshot that grazes her leg in a park. This Liz here. And she's blaming it on Amy Flora, who's the wife. Like she's sort of blaming the stuff that's happened to her. And it seems like it's happening to her from Carrie and now potentially from Amy.
So to just review what's happened, blizzard of these text messages, stay away from, Carrie says, stay away from Liz. Then Liz's home is actually burned down.
And
then
shot.
Liz is actually shot in a park. I mean, it did the bullet only grazing her, but that. So this is, and then Carrie at the same time, in addition to this, has said she's moved away and she's missed now her father's funeral. Okay, I'm clear on it. Okay, go ahead.
So there's like these 3 women and Dave. And so Carrie's mom at some point after the missed funeral reports Carrie as missing. And so now the police are involved. So if you go down on the visuals, and so they bring
no
in
one's seen Carrie, so it's a weird thing.
Carrie.
It's coming from her phone and all, but maybe somebody's... Okay, go ahead.
And there's all these things happening, and, and it's happening to Liz. Like, Liz is a central focus of this, and Liz is sort of saying, like, it's definitely Carrie, but then when she gets shot, she thinks it's Amy Flora.
Tangled double love triangle of Shanna, Liz, Golyar is what we're seeing on screen now on the corkboard.
So what happens is they bring in a forensic, basically tech lead from the police station, and he looks at hundreds of thousands of pings over the course of several years that have been sent by Carrie.
From the cell phone.
Okay. And he decides he's going to have to write a program to figure out all the IP addresses. So he writes a program and he's able to find the top 10 IP addresses that certain messages were sent from. And then he distills that down to one guy's house. And if you go up, his name is Todd Butterbaugh, this gentleman here. And you won't believe it, but Todd, he works for that forensic tech lead.
Wow.
He works under him at the police department. And he says, listen, it wasn't me, but I have this on and off girlfriend named Liz Golyar.
Oh my God.
And after her house burned, she came to live with me. Wow. And it turns out it has been Liz Golyar this whole time.
All along, sending all of those text messages.
Sending all of the text messages. She was sending all of the emails. She was stalking Dave. She was stalking Amy. She was stalking the kids. She shot herself in the park.
She burned her own house down.
She burned her own house down. And once they realize that it's Liz, they really now need evidence to prove that it's Liz because they don't have a body.
Well, wait a minute. But what's implied here, what you're saying, they don't have a body, is that she killed the other woman.
Yeah, it's implied
Carrie.
that she killed Carrie, but they don't have a body, so they don't know that Carrie's dead.
She killed Carrie and has her cell phone, and from her cell phone, all those messages came. So how do they go about trying to find a body? Or what happens? They take her into questioning, or...
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. This is months and months and months of strategy with Liz, but they basically tell Liz is now kind of bringing Amy into this, as I mentioned, and sort of distributing the blame between Carrie and Amy. And so she says, oh, I think Amy killed Carrie, because they're saying, like, we don't think Carrie's alive anymore. And they say to her, well, if you could get the real story out of if we could get the real story out of Amy, then we can arrest her for Carrie's murder. So Liz goes home and writes out the murder of Carrie Farver as pretending as it's from Amy, the wife. And that's where they go to the car, and that's where they find the blood. And then they end up finding photographs on an old cell phone SIM card that was Liz, that has a picture of the body of Carrie. And so ultimately they have enough evidence to find Liz guilty.
That's her car?
That's Carrie's car.
And she was shot in that car, it looks like?
She was stabbed in that car.
Stabbed?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
yes.
She was... did they piece together exactly what happened, when it happened, and how it happened? Yeah,
because Carrie wrote her own admittance. Because
okay, what did she say there?
She said basically that she lured Carrie out to her car, she stabbed her in the car, killed her, and then she burned the body. And so that's what she said in the emails, pretending that they were from Amy Flora.
Wow.
Yeah. And it turns out that Liz's son, which is where you see sort of that triangle and where you saw an earlier picture of Cody, he was an infant named Cody, and he was shaken to death, and she was the prime suspect. So in fact, there had been a murder earlier in her life, and it was unfortunately her little boy. And then, as I mentioned earlier, she burned down her house knowing that her pets were inside. I mean, really, really just awful, awful maniacal stuff.
Wow.
It's awful, yeah. So this is actually on Netflix right now. You can stream it now on Netflix. And the next story quickly is Jim Mordecai, the truth about Jim.
You can take it's just wild, by the way, the trouble. It's interesting, the human psyche. I don't mean to be I'm not trying to, it sounds like I'm going to get deep. I'm not. Just that it's weird how somebody gets so jacked up on somebody else that they're ready to kill and, do all this other crap to stay with them. It's absurd. I mean, it's just so...
Yeah.
They hijack their own lives to stay in the thrall of whomever.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely...
I mean, look at this Liz Golyar. I mean, she's traded in her whole life, and she gets... it's one lie on another, and but it is a certain disconnect. I'm asking you this as a true crime analyst. Mm-hmm. There is a disconnect, right? I mean, this is a deep psychological issue these people have.
Yes, definitely. Well, absolutely. I mean,
it's more than the depravity of killing somebody. It's going through all the rest of this stuff. It's wrapped up in romance, or romance is the wrong word. I mean, lust or love or something. Yeah,
it's a deep mental illness and sickness that's driving you to torture the lives of many people after you've killed their loved one.
Yeah, exactly.
And then do horrific crimes that in fact kill or harm other creatures and people. And it's a real sickness. It's really scary. And it goes on for years. I mean, I think it's from like 2012 to 2015. Imagine 3 or 4 years of your life where you're being stalked by somebody and they're threatening your life and the lives of your kids and the lives of the people that you love. And you think it's somebody else that whole time.
Wow.
And then you suddenly find out it's the person who you've been trusting. It's the person who, the other thing too, beyond the fact that she's many things, including a narcissist, she made herself the center of all of the attacks, right? So a lot of the attacks were on Liz, keying her car, burning her house down. So there was this inordinate amount of anger toward Liz for someone that Carrie allegedly, had only passed once in her life in like a brief moment. And so I think that also tipped the law enforcement off that there was something of imbalance there. Mm-hmm.
All right. What is the second one then? I'm sorry.
The second one is the truth about Jim. And so Jim Mordecai he's a teacher at Half Moon Bay High School.
Yeah, this is a guy. This is the Santa Rosa thing.
And
Half Moon Bay is south of San Francisco. Santa Rosa is north of San Francisco. Just to give people the kind of general geography. Go ahead.
And so he lives there. He has a couple ex-wives, and his most recent wife, I think it was his third marriage. Her kids went to the school that he taught at, and he taught various classes, but he was somewhat known for Future Farmers of America. And so he was a teacher in that space. But he was known for doing pretty terrible things to the kids. Now, it was all alleged that he was having relationships with the students. One of your listeners wrote in and told me about some incidents that she had heard about at school. And she was actually a student of Jim at Half Moon Bay. But this whole series, it's a 4-part series. It's on Max right now. It's streaming on Max. Is done by his step-granddaughter, and her name is Sierra Gorder. And Sierra is convinced that Jim Mordecai is the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murderer. And she comes with all this different evidence to the case to the fact that Jim is the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murderer. And that is 6 murders that happened between 1972 and 1973 to young women between the ages of 12 and 24. And Jim notoriously went after young girls, 12, 13, 14, 15. And beyond that, they have physical evidence. They have testimony and different evidence from people who, in fact, maybe saw the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murderer or saw him in passing. And so they collect all of this evidence, and they are looking to determine if he is, in fact, this person, the suspect.
No, but can you just tell me suspect of what these
Santa
murders?
Rosa hitchhiker murders.
I get, but were there, how many murders were there?
There were 6.
Okay, I'm sorry.
6 young girls, between the ages of 12 and 24.
You did, yeah, there you go. I'm sorry.
And in fact, those all took place in Santa Rosa, and there is even further evidence that he might have been the Zodiac killer. Now, I think an expert in the Zodiac killer somewhat debunks that during the series, but they do have DNA from Jim, from his family, and they do have DNA from one of the murders. So right now, the police in Santa Rosa have Jim's DNA, and they have the DNA from the murder. So we shall see if they match it. But there is no news on whether or not they're pursuing that.
And again, the person who brought this forward is the daughter of this guy who
granddaughter.
Okay, granddaughter. Okay,
Step granddaughter.
I'm only auditing the class, so I only get I kind of get the general idea of what you're saying.
Now you see why he doesn't remember what we did all weekend. He's not even present when I'm doing the story, and I'm talking about murder. Like, it couldn't be more.
That's exactly
why
I can't follow it. It's like,
but you're right in the sense of it's the step granddaughter, it's the stepdaughter, and it's the ex-wife. Jim died of cancer, I think, in the early 2000s. So he's been gone for a little while. But as they were moving him out of the house, they found like girls' bows, and girls' earrings, and things that didn't belong to anybody in the house. That, as I mentioned, is that further physical evidence that he might, in fact, have been the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murder.
Wow. So this, again, it's on Max.
This is on Max.
The Truth About Jim.
The Truth About
And you
Jim.
liked it. And you liked both these series and that you've just recounted to us. You liked the Netflix as well. But
Yes, I like the Netflix as well. I watched the Netflix twice, and then I watched The Truth About Jim. So,
geez, Lover, Stalker, Killer is the Netflix.
So this came out on February 9th, as you would before Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And then the other one came out on February 15th, which I thought were sort of funny dates to release these. But they know their audience. So, yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. Half Moon Bay and Santa Rosa are pretty far apart. That's true. But they believe he
had a cabin up closer to Santa Rosa that was a family cabin. And so he would go there and he would spend time there. Now, that's also where he took some of the students where he sexually assaulted them. So that is why he was in and around Santa Rosa. He also grew up around there. And at the time that these murders happened, there was obviously no GPS. So you really had to know the back roads of that city to be able to navigate them. And the interesting part was a lot of the bodies from the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders were in relatively the same area. So you'd have to know the area to be able to go back to those places to dump the bodies.
My friend had him as a teacher, says Ms. Organic. Wow.
Yeah.
And Janet says, I had him as a teacher too.
Yeah.
Janet had him as a teacher. Wow, this guy was...
He was very abusive to the stepchildren that lived with him. He was very creepy. There are parts of this that I haven't gone into detail just for timing, but he did, in fact, sexually assault one of his stepdaughters. He was a very, very awful human being and perpetrated crimes on really these captive kids that were, in his class and in his school.
BW asks, did they do any forensics, or is this just a bunch of hyperbole? No one can just ask, did they do any forensics and leave it at that? They would go, or is this a bunch of hyperbole?
Well, I mean, they do have the DNA.
Yeah, the DNA. She just mentioned the DNA.
But I mean,
but it's true. I mean, it could be.
I think the Zodiac Killer was maybe to stretch
a little hyperbolic.
A third part of the series.
Yeah, that might be with the hyperbole.
3 or 4 of the segments. But
we need one more episode. Is there anything else you could tie this guy to?
What else happened in the 70s in Northern California we could tie him to? It's funny. They start out the whole series by identifying, they say Northern California as being the sort of world center of serial killers in the 70s. And so, it was rich with opportunity to connect him or attach him to things. But he was not a good guy. So if you're interested in this, it is on Max. And then, as I mentioned, the others on Netflix
as well. Mm-hmm. Wow. Courtney, so impressive today with 2 offerings that are in the zeitgeist already and available to be plunged in some kind of deep dive of true crime, both on Netflix and on Max. And you've given us the route to follow up. It's very exciting. I myself, with not even marginal interest in this crap, may actually get into it because you've spun a web of intrigue with me.
Well,
so
I mean, if you have an extra 6 hours, you can watch them both.
When you say I've watched these twice, I'm going, where do you find the time?
I know. Well, that's what happens when your partner plays a lot of poker. You got a lot of time by yourself.
What?
That's Mark's True Crime Corner for today.
True Crime Corner, only on the Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.